So I'll go and get started. This afternoon, like Chip said, I'm going to be talking about changes and links of dolphinfish from sampling 5 different sport fishing tournaments in the Southeast United States. And before I get started, I wanted to thank the considerable input of my co-authors that are listed on this slide. And for those of you that might be interested in seeing a full report of this research work, it's been published last year in North American Journal of Fisheries Management. If you can't find a PDF on the internet, you can just ping me by the email, and I'd be happy to send you a copy electronically if you can't find it on the internet. So we had a number of reasons for undertaking this study, looking at potential temporal changes in dolphinfish links using sport fishing tournaments as an opportunistic sampling venue. The first is that, as many of you in the listening audience know, there's been an interdecadal decline in the commercial catch rate of dolphinfish. This has been demonstrated in the Lynch et al. Paper from 2018, and more recently in Matt Damiano et al.'s paper from 2024. Further, there's been a variety of anecdotal observations that have been brought to our attention regarding declining dolphinfish sizes over recent years. For example, I live just a couple blocks from the working waterfront in Morehead City, North Carolina, and for many years predating this study, I was hearing reports about declining dolphinfish sizes via sport fishing catches along the Morehead City waterfront and elsewhere along the North Carolina coast. So my supervisor at NC State University and I, Jeff Buckle and I, we discussed maybe some ways to more formally investigate the potential decline in dolphinfish sizes using sport fishing tournaments, again, as an opportunistic sampling platform. Further, as many of you in the listening audience this afternoon know, this is a data limited stock. There's no, to the best of our knowledge, no fishery independent survey data that are being collected on the dolphinfish in the Western North Atlantic region. And finally, there's been a dramatic increase in recreational fishing activity in the U.S. South Atlantic region. And when you talk to many prominent sport fishing captains and you ask them what are some of the most salient changes in the offshore fishing activity in this region over the last 2 to 3 to 4 decades, they'll say there's been just this tremendous increase in the number of private recreational fishing vessels, including vessels that are targeting pelagic, such as the dolphinfish. I thought it was worth just taking a step back for a moment and looking at some of the trends based on Marine Recreational Information Program data, and just having a look at this trend specifically for dolphinfish over the 43 years or so that MRIP data have been collected. What I present in this two-dimensional graph is, of course, year on the x-axis, and then this, I've got 2 different types of data on the y-axis. The light gray bar is the numbers, the observed catch of dolphinfish, the observed numbers of dolphinfish over that 43-ish years time series of data. And you can see that light gray bar, that's almost a flat trend between the first couple of years in that time series and the last couple of years. That trend has almost a zero slope to it. In contrast, the black bar is the number of offshore private recreational fishing trips on a year-by-year basis. And you can see almost a doubling, if not more, depending on the year that you're looking at, in those number of offshore private recreational trips over that time series. So again, we're seeing this increase, a dramatic increase in private recreational fish trip effort. And for the whole fishery, recreational fishery, regardless of the boat type, we're seeing an almost flat appearance to the number of dolphinfish that are caught on an annual basis, again, based on MRIP data. I got this graph courtesy of the Southeast Fishery Science Center website, and this looks at dolphinfish landings in the EEZ, and specifically 3 different subregions of our EEZ. So this is total landings on the y-axis in millions of pounds, and the x-axis we have whatever that is, 32 or 33 years of time series of data. The green in each of these annual bars are mid-Atlantic catch, broken down by commercial and recreational. The red and the pink is the South Atlantic, and the blue is the Gulf of Mexico. And since we're talking now specifically, we're focused on Brendan and I and others, Jeff Buckle and my other co-authors that contributed to this project, working at sport fishing tournaments in the South Atlantic. I'll go ahead and just focus for the moment in on the pink section of each of these bars. And you can see in the most recent years of this graph that was provided by the Southeast Science Center, you can see in those most recent years, we have a recreational catch in the pink section of each of these annual bars, a recreational catch that's approximately half on a pound by pound basis compared to a decade or two earlier. So we're seeing this drop in recreational landings in the South Atlantic, in particular from this graph from the Southeast Science Center. So our objective in this study was to quite simply investigate potential temporal changes in dolphinfish links using sport fishing tournaments as an opportunistic sampling platform. So here are the 5 tournaments that I'm going to be talking about this afternoon that we either sampled directly or we obtained data from other sources from north to south. We obtained data from the Hatteras Village Offshore Open, as the name implies. This is a sport fishing tournament in May of each year in Hatteras, North Carolina. Those data were obtained from 2007 to 2023. Brendan and Jeff and I and others, other co-authors, sampled directly the Big Rock or BRT tournament right here in Morehead City, North Carolina, from 2003 to 2023. My co-authors in South Carolina, Amy Dukes and Elizabeth Gooding, sampled, along with researchers before them, sampled the Georgetown Blue Marlin tournament in Georgetown, South Carolina from 1993 to 2023. And also in Charleston, South Carolina, the Carolina Billfish Classic from 2010 to 2023. And finally, we're able to obtain sport fishing tournament data from the Kingfish Dolphinfish Wahoo Classic in West Palm Beach, Florida, from 2012 to 2023. So you might be asking yourself, and I was kind of asking the same question a couple of years ago when I started this exercise, of all the dozens upon dozens of sport fishing tournaments that target dolphinfish in the Southeast United States, why'd we target those, or why'd we hone in on those 5 tournaments? And I was really struck by the lack of consistent and large sample sizes of dolphinfish amongst the many tournaments that target dolphinfish and offer prizes for dolphinfish. There's very few that collect data in a consistent fashion, that have those data properly archived, and that have large annual sample sizes of both male and female dolphinfish. Fortunately, the 5 tournaments that we focused in on do have a consistency of fishing times and areas and rules, and a fairly large annual sample size of both male and female dolphinfish compared to the many other sport fishing tournaments in the Southeast U.S. that target the species. And furthermore, one of the things we thought we really had working in our favor in selecting those 5 tournaments is we had a consistency within each tournament how the data were obtained. For example, at 3 of the tournaments, we collected scale-only data. So for the Big Rock tournament, the Hatteras Village tournament, and the KDW in West Palm Beach, Florida, we only sampled dolphinfish that were brought to official tournament scales. In contrast, my colleagues down in South Carolina, they sampled both boat and scale data. So for those fishing boats that had entered a tournament and elected just to keep their fish on ice without bringing in tournament scales, my colleagues at South Carolina Diener, they sampled or subsampled those fish as well as sampling fish that were brought to the tournament scales. So our methods included separate analyses in this study for male versus female dolphinfish based on some previous work, including by Jeff and one of his former master's students. We know that male and female dolphinfish have different terminal growth trajectories, different L infinities between the 2 sexes. We conducted an interaction effects analysis of covariance model for each of the sexes, where we regressed total length versus year. And so that produced a separate regression line for each of the 5 tournaments. and the regression slope for each tournament sex combination was considered meaningful when the 95% percentile set for the posterior probability distribution failed to overlap 0. So now going on to some results here. The next 5 slides will show you results for each of the 5 respective tournaments that we sampled. The appearance is going to be similar. The top graph in each of the next 5 slides will be the result for males. The bottom graph will be the result for females. The points, are, of course, are raw observations for male and female dolphinfish respectively. Across the x-axis will be the years that each of the tournaments was sampled. Across the y-axis will be total length in millimeters. The solid line in each of the panels will be the median regression estimate for the posterior probability distribution for the regression line. And the lower and upper dashed lines will be the 2.5 and 97.5 quantile estimates about that median line. So why am I starting with the Carolina Billfish Classic in Charleston, South Carolina? This was the only of the 5 tournaments, the only one where there were not meaningful size changes of male and female dolphinfish respectively across the time series. In contrast, when we look at the Big Rock Blue Marlin tournament, we saw meaningful size changes, that is meaningful size declines for male, again in the top panel, and female in the bottom panel. We saw meaningful size changes for males and females across the 20 years that we directly collected data from the Big Rock tournament. Meaningful size declines for both males and females from the approximate 16, 17 years that the Hatteras Village Offshore Open was sampled. Meaningful size declines from the Georgetown, South Carolina Blue Marlin tournament, where dolphinfish is one of the prize winning species in that particular tournament. And finally, for the KDW in West Palm Beach, Florida, we saw meaningful size declines from that tournament as well. So you might be wondering, okay, if we're looking at means or medians, I took a Bayesian analytical approach to crunching these data. So I'll talk about medians. What were the median size declines between the first and last year of sampling for each of those 4 respective tournaments where we saw meaningful size changes? So let me walk you through what you're seeing on this slide, because the appearance of the next 2 slides will be similar. The dark gray bar is the first year of sampling of each respective tournament. The light gray bar is the most recent year sampling. I have total length in millimeters, again, on the y-axis in each of those 4 tournaments where we saw meaningful size changes across the x-axis. The Big Rock tournament, or BRT, the Hatteras Village Offshore Open, the Georgetown tournament, and the KDW in West Palm Beach, Florida. So for convenience, I'm just doing a little bit of rounding housekeeping to the nearest English measurement, that is inches. So I'll take this out of the millimeter approach that many scientists in the audience use and just change this to inches out of convenience here. So we're seeing between the first and last year of sampling for male dolphinfish a median size decline of 6 inches for males from the Big Rock, 4 inches respectively for the Hatteras Village and Georgetown tournaments, and an eye-popping, in my opinion, an eye-popping 17-inch size decline for the KDW in West Palm Beach, Florida. Now this slide shows you the predicted median change in size decline for female dolphinfish from the same 4 tournaments on the x-axis. Again, length is again on the y-axis here. So we're seeing for the Big Rock a 14-inch size decline for females from that tournament, 5 inches each for the Hatteras Village and Georgetown tournaments, and 10 inches for the KDW. The next exercise that we did, and there's some more details on this in the North American Journal of Fisheries Management publication, is took a published total length to fecundity relationship for females of the species. So we wanted to see between the first and most recent years of sampling for each of those 4 respective tournaments, what were some predicted reductions in average female fecundity. And we found at the Big Rock, there was a 67% reduction in fecundity. At the Hatters Village tournament, predicted 34% reduction. The Georgetown tournament, a 37% reduction in fecundity. And finally, for the Kingfish, Dolphinfish, Wahoo Classic in Florida, a 65% reduction in female fecundity. Unfortunately, if you just bring a bunch of dead dolphinfish to the stock, to the best of our knowledge, me and my co-authors, we cannot separate out environmental from fishing effects. There's been a lot in the published literature how environmental effects might be affecting fish size and other rates for pelagic species such as dolphinfish. But we do feel, with that caveat in mind here, the fact that we cannot separate out environmental effects from fishing effects with our sampling and analytical approach in this study. And Brendan alerted me to this paper when we were writing up the results from it in preparation for submission in North American Journal. This paper by Phil Goodyear, which I took a screenshot of in the lower right-hand side of this slide, it was published a decade ago, and one of the theses from the Goodyear paper and Transactions of the American Fisheries Society on another pelagic was when you see the disappearance of the largest animals from a sample, that could be reflective of excessive rates of fishing mortality. And so we think this is potentially one of the mechanisms at play in what we're finding through this study on dolphinfish. Our method does assume constant fishery selectivity over time. For example, some of you in the audience might know there is a requirement in billfish, U.S. Atlantic billfish tournaments to use, when you're fishing natural baits or combination baits, natural bait lure combinations, there was a requirement to now use circle hooks starting, I believe, in 2006. But we think, for a variety of reasons, I won't go into details. Maybe that's better if someone's interested in some of the details. We can talk about that in the Q&A session after Brendan's talk in a few minutes. We don't think that has a lot of effect on the results. And again, we might reserve some of that, some of the nuances of that discussion point for later. One of the things we kicked around as well, what's the effect of social media? For example, we now know that the Big Rock tournament has a lot of social media presence about it, not only in how the Big Rock disseminates information regarding tournament activities, but also the inclination of participants perhaps to weigh small dolphinfish in more recent years compared to earlier in the time series. But I have BRT versus Hatters Village Offshore Open in the last bullet on this slide, because we know, in contrast, and talking to another one of my co-authors, Randy Gregory, we know that the Hatters Village Offshore Open compared to the Big Rock doesn't have a lot of social media presence, but we're still seeing consistent, well, the magnitude of the size decline is different between the two tournaments. We're still seeing a consistent trend in size declines of female and male dolphinfish in each of those two tournaments. So two very different tournaments, as far as their social media presence or social media splash, if you will, but consistent results for each of the two sexes of dolphinfish regarding temporal size declines. I think validation of these study results probably comes from a couple different sources. And thinking about this now retrospectively, I'm a couple of years removed from data collection from the study. There's a general consistency, again, with the exception of that Carolina Billfish Classic, where we sampled or collected data over 13 years from that particular tournament. Regarding the other four tournaments, there's a general consistency of our results amongst those four tournaments. And you'll see him now I'm thinking about the paper that Brendan headed up, and he's going to be talking about in a few minutes, that I was a co-author on. We have validation of the study results from this work with what Brendan's going to be presenting in a few minutes' time. And then, as far as some potential future validation, one of the easiest things to sample, and I think y'all are going to get a chuckle by this, because you're going to be shaking your head affirmatively, is one of the easiest things for a fisheries ecologist to sample is dead fish at a dock. They don't move, they're easy, you don't need to worry about getting seasick. You can just go down to a dock and sample a bunch of dead fish. So we have in our tool set, Jeff and I and others, Randy Gregory, other folks that are my colleagues on this paper, we can keep on sampling these tournaments. And indeed, before the ink is dry on Dolphinfish Wahoo Regulatory Amendment 3, we have as at least 3 more years of data in our tool set. Last year, this year, right now when these tournaments are being conducted, and potentially in 2026, I'd be happy, I'm not wishing for it, but I'd be happy to rerun these regressions with fresh data to see if some of the trends in declining dolphinfish lengths might change by virtue of adding a few fresh years of data. Again, not only last year, but this year and potentially next year as well, before fishery managers have to decide on final measures that are being proposed in regulatory amendment number 3. And then finally, I wanted to highlight this map. This map is courtesy of the Dolphinfish Research Program, and it shows a really salient feature of dolphinfish movement ecology in the Western North Atlantic. It shows that fish that are tagged off the Southeast United States move to the Caribbean, and correspondingly, fish that are tagged in the Caribbean move to the Southeast United States. We know right now, as we speak, at a minimum, that the Puerto Rico Department of Natural and Environmental Resources and perhaps other agencies, other natural resource agencies that in the Caribbean, but at a minimum, the Puerto Rico Department of Natural and Environmental Resources is sitting on this really numerically rich data set of sport fishing tournament data, where they've collected for many years the same type of sport fishing tournament data. And if those data were to see the light of day, this could potentially corroborate the findings that we found here recently in the Southeast United States with the 5 tournaments that we sampled. So some conclusions and implications: we found a decline in dolphinfish sizes at 4 of the 5 sport fishing tournaments that we've been sampling over the years and decades. This, as I highlighted in one of my recent slides, this has implications for population level fecundity. I'm preaching to the choir here that a dolphinfish stock assessment would be really important in the Western North Atlantic, where if we understood through the assessment some trends in rates such as fishing mortality rates and spawning stock biomass, which would help fishery managers in making decisions regarding setting catch levels. And again, as many of you in the listening audience know, that Regulatory Amendment 3 to the Dolphinfish Wahoo Fishery Management Plan is considering potential changes to size and retention limits for the Southeast United States recreational fishery for the species. And our results are consistent with the spirit or the motivation, if you will, for Regulatory Amendment 3 to try to find management measures to conserve the species. And I think that's my last slide. I think we'll refrain in taking questions now if everybody's okay with that, and I'll turn it over to Brendan at this point in time.
All right, Brendan, it should be coming to you. We're seeing your Lenovo screen. There you go.
Great, thanks, Chip, and thanks, Paul. I'm going to assume you guys can hear me. If you can't, please speak up. So this is a study that, yeah, great. So this is a study that Paul and I and our colleague George Stilson at the North Carolina Division of Marine Fisheries conducted over the last year or so, and was just recently published in April. So thanks to Paul and George. And this will be rather similar to what Paul just presented, although it is a completely different data set, completely different analysis. So yeah, spoiler, there's no good news. Just a little additional background to what Paul gave on dolphinfish. Some of you may know that dolphinfish are a globally distributed species in temperate and tropical waters. That's the map on the left. And also dolphinfish do aggregate underneath structure in the pelagic environment. So that is an image from off of Hatteras, North Carolina from last week or the week before of a really good looking mat of sargassum grass that typically would contain underneath it 1 or more dolphinfish. And also, one of my favorite images is the reason why we care about dolphinfish. This is an image from my personal archives from after a trip last year of some deep fried mahi that is, in fact, the reason why many of us know and love this stock. little more background on the South Atlantic, not to be too duplicative with Paul's work, but the recreational landings on average are 1 to 2 million fish, which in comparison to the commercial landings in this region is about a tenfold or one order of magnitude difference. And this stock has historically been particularly important for the six-pack charter or for hire fleet. Another couple personal images there. And so recently, as Paul mentioned, we have had this observation from a couple of different sources that there are fewer large individuals coming to the dock. So that's the general motivation here. Paul's paper was conducted before this analysis was begun. So that paper was motivation for this paper. In addition, those papers that Paul mentioned, the Lynch and Damiano papers, I think Matt Damiano presented his results at this seminar series last year. So go back and listen to that one if that intrigues you. And again, what Paul mentioned, there's just no fishery independent data for this species, which leads to a need for alternative indices to be developed. So we had the idea to take a look at a data set that we imagined existed, but we weren't positive. Thankfully, it did exist. And that data set came from the North Carolina Division of Marine Fisheries, their citation program. So citation here is a good thing. It's what's awarded when a trophy fish of a certain species is caught. It's not the bad kind of citation. And so for dolphinfish, the minimum citation size is a 35-pound animal. And that has been the case since North Carolina DMF began giving out citations. They began digitizing their citations in the year 2000. So when we decided to take a look at their citation data, we just restricted it to the year 2000 to present. We felt that a quarter century or thereabouts was an appropriate time series for this analysis. And so we embarked upon an investigation of the citation data for dolphinfish from North Carolina DMF to see if there were any trends in those data. So if you focus your attention on the left-hand side of the screen, this is the first 17 or so years of data from the citation program for dolphinfish. So these are the numbers of individual dolphinfish that were checked in at an official weigh station and were awarded a certificate because they were 35 pounds or greater. I'm not asking you to focus on the particular numbers here. I'm just showing you what these data look like. And so when we started playing around with this, we thought to ourselves, you know, a lot like the same line of thinking that Paul just got done talking about with tournament data, the various social pressures and other factors that might result in differences in the number of citations that are brought to the dock, other than the obvious biological reason that there are fewer larger fish out there. So we got to thinking, well, maybe in the later part of the time series, perhaps there's an increased social pressure because of social media, that folks want to go get citations more badly than they did at the beginning of the time series. So how can we control for those social factors, whether they're positive or negative? So we decided to take a look at everybody's second favorite pelagic in the South Atlantic, which is wahoo. So we also pulled data for wahoo citations that were concurrent with the data that we pulled for dolphinfish citations. The reason we did this, again, is to control for any social effects that might have changed the propensity of an angler who caught a trophy animal to weigh it and have the citation, fill out the citation paperwork and go through those motions. So we looked at dolphinfish and wahoo citations. This is just for North Carolina from the year 2000. I didn't have room on this slide to carry this table all the way through to 2023, which is the last year in the data set, but that's available in the paper. I'll provide a link to that at the end. So anyway, we got to thinking about this and we were plotting these raw numbers of citations, and we thought, well, you know, the other thing that really affects the number of fish that are caught, besides the number of fish that are in the ocean, is the amount of effort. And so we looked at what data sources were available for the amount of recreational effort. Citation program is only recreational data. You're not eligible for a citation if it's a commercial fish. So we decided to pull numbers for the amount of recreational fishing trips that were taken off of North Carolina for each year in our data set that occurred in the exclusive economic zone. And we went to the Marine Recreational Information Program for the number of trips. So that's MRIP data you're seeing now. So we have our data set. We have our dolphin citation numbers, we have our wahoo citation numbers, and we have the number of trips. And the idea here is that we can create an amount of effort that is controlled for, or an amount of catch that is controlled for by the amount of effort. Usually we think about that as catch per unit effort. Actually, in this analysis, we turned it on its head and we came up with effort per unit catch numbers, which translates to the number of trips that is necessary to produce a citation dolphinfish or a citation wahoo. We wanted to show some uncertainty around our estimates, so we also pulled the uncertainty estimates from the Marine Recreational Information Program. And so this is our overall table. It's a bit of a bear. It's in the paper if you so desire. And so we looked at the lower and upper 95% intervals around the effort numbers, around the trip numbers, and then we divided that through for dolphinfish and for wahoo. So again, try not to look too closely at these numbers because I'll show them to you graphically in a couple of slides. We took a similar linear modeling approach to what Paul described in his talk a few minutes ago. Once again, our response variable here was the trips per citation or effort per unit catch, just to put it in terms that we thought were more understandable than a very small fraction catch per unit effort number. We examined a number of different options for this model. What's important to know is that the best model here is the model that produced or modeled a separate slope for each species, and that's what that year times species interaction term is showing in the top model. And just know that in the selection process where we looked at all these different models, there was no competition. The best model was by far the only model for consideration for modeling these data. Okay, so here's what that looks like graphically. So the light blue dots, the individual dots, are the number of trips in that year on the x-axis, trips on the y-axis, the number of trips in that year that were required to produce a citation of dolphinfish in light blue, wahoo in dark blue. Notice that the trend line, which is the results of the model with the shaded uncertainty regions for dolphinfish, increases quite substantially from the year 2000 to the year 2023, where the dark blue line and dots appears to have roughly no trend for wahoo from the year 2000 to the year 2023. Again, we modeled these two species in the same framework to try to understand whether any changes that we were seeing, which we are seeing for dolphinfish, were a function of social pressures or whether there was a change in the dolphinfish stock that occurred independent of the change in the wahoo stock. And that does appear to be happening here. And what that actually looks like is about a four-fold increase in the number of trips that was necessary to produce a citation dolphinfish from the year 2000 to the year 2023. Again, a citation is a 35-pound or bigger dolphin. It's a nice dolphin. And so I want to draw your attention to where the lowest points on this plot are. There's one here in 2008. Otherwise, these first 4 points are the lowest that we have. And then the highest point was the most recent year in the time series, which was 2023. I took the liberty of acquiring 2024 data for dolphin and wahoo from North Carolina DMS. So thank you to my co-author, George Stilson, for that. And here's what that looks like. We have a new record for 2024, a new record for number of trips per citation dolphinfish. So in 2024, it took almost 10,000 trips to produce a citation dolphinfish off North Carolina, whereas in the year 2000, we were looking at 2,000 trips, or here is more like 1,200 trips, way lower. So this difference, now that I've updated the model, is more like a 4.5-fold increase. It was a 4-fold increase here. This is published in the paper. I updated it here. This is an even steeper increase now that we have the updated data. So what does this look like? We know that this corroborates the information that Paul presented a few minutes ago. I just wanted to show some results from the other studies that have worked on this species in this region in recent years. The Lynch et al. Paper, this is scaled catch per unit effort for dolphinfish across some of the same time series, but going back into the 1980s. And you can see a steep decline was found in the Lynch paper for catch per unit effort. And then the Damiano paper, the main conclusion of which was that there seems to have been a decline in the abundance of this stock. Apologies for not having the y-axis labeled here, but this is an estimate of abundance for different seasons, the different lines. A decline in the abundance of this stock starting around the year 2020. So why do we think this happened? Well, here's some more figures from the Damiano paper. One hypothesis is that dolphinfish have shifted northward, but the Damiano paper explicitly found that that does not appear to be the case, with the eastings and northings here showing that the stock does not appear to have moved east or north over the time scale that Damiano et al. Examined. We do not prefer this hypothesis for why the dolphinfish declines have been observed in our papers, both mine that I'm presenting now and that what Paul presented a few minutes ago. Also, as far as range shifts, we might expect if dolphinfish were shifting north or if their timing of arrival to North Carolina was happening earlier, we might expect that the ordinal day, which is to say the calendar day from 1 to 365 of when citations were happening may have gotten substantially earlier from the beginning of our time series to the end. This is now what I'm showing on the screen. So each box plot shows the ordinal day for that year for all the dolphinfish citations. And we see a very slight earlier arrival of citation dolphinfish in our data set, but we're talking on the order of like a day or two from the beginning of the time series to the end. So this is, once again, not something that we think is at least wholly responsible for the overall results that we're finding. What about decreased productivity in the stock due to environmental changes? Well, many of you know that dolphinfish have high fecundity. They mature very early. Anybody who has caught dolphinfish off of the Southeast US will know that it's very common for even small female dolphinfish to have ripe or ripening eggs in their ovaries. They grow so quickly, they mature so quickly, they have a generalist diet. We have a paper in review right now showing that there has been no change in diet over the last 25 or so years. Paul can fill in some gaps on that. And we have also not seen any increase in the percentage of empty stomachs in the sample that we're taking for this diet paper. So once again, this is a possibility, but it's not our preferred hypothesis. Well, what about overexploitation? Well, from multiple sources with independent data sets, we have seen declines in fishery-dependent data. We know, as Paul presented, there's been increased effort in the private recreational fleet. And we've also seen increased efficiency in that fleet and in the for-hire fleet, not to mention also the commercial fleet, where we have faster boats, we have more reliable motors, we have better GPS, and also now there's omnidirectional sonar, which is only increasing the efficiency of the vessels that have it. If you don't know, this is a sonar that can show on a screen at the helm of the vessel what sonar marks there are in the water column in 360 degrees around the vessel, which allows the captain to direct the boat towards those marks and specifically target individual fish. It's a really cool technology. I've seen it in action. I have caught marlin while on board when this was being used. It's awesome. It only serves to increase efficiency. And this is being used, by the way, to catch dolphinfish. The heaviest dolphinfish that was weighed in the Big Rock tournament last year was identified as a mark using omnidirectional sonar. So this overexploitation hypothesis or increased fishing mortality on the stock hypothesis is our preferred one for why we're seeing this. It may also be a synergistic effect of multiple things, could be environmental and anthropogenic, but it does seem to us that the overexploitation hypothesis is the prevailing one at this time. So I am going to leave it there. I have this slide showing the two papers that we presented here, Paul's and then mine. The QR codes, if you are so inclined, on the screen will lead you to those respective papers. As Paul mentioned, we're also more than happy to provide PDFs or links to these or to carry on further discussions with anyone attending or who may be listening to the recording of this webinar at a later point. So I'm going to leave it there, and Chip, I'm going to leave it up to you whether we continue sharing a screen or whether we go to a more of a less formal Q&A.
Yeah, I'm going to take back control for just a moment. That way we can, I'll show how to operate the webinar. If you don't mind, I think I might go back to you with those QR codes. That way people can, they can potentially find those papers a little bit easier.
Sure.
So once again, how to operate the webinar. You can type a question into this question box. The reason that I'll read those out loud is because not all the questions will go to the public. And so I just want to make sure everybody's seeing the same question. If you want to ask a question, you can click on this icon here. That's a hand-drawn hand. It might look like this. If it's green, that means your hand is down. Red means it's raised. And then once again, after you've been notified by the webinar that it's your opportunity to speak, just make sure you click on the red microphone, make sure it turns green, and that'll indicate that we should be able to hear you. And with that, Brendan, I'll switch it back to you real quick.
Sounds good.
And then open it up to everyone if you have any questions. I know that was a lot of information to take in pretty quick. You guys did a great job going through them and explaining the details of the studies. Not seeing any hands or questions quite yet, so I'll ask one. In your analysis, did you all ever go back and see the impact of changing the time series in the analysis? Like for yours, Brendan, did you consider just doing it during the MRIP phase of the recreational sampling as opposed to going all the way back through the time series when the sampling had changed?
So, Chip, I'm just going to try to make sure I understand your question correctly. You're asking whether if we had lopped off some of the data at a point where the MRIP sampling changed, would we have seen a different result?
Right. Yep.
Yeah, we didn't do that. That's certainly an exercise that could be done, but just showing you the raw data here with the model predictions projected over it, I think if you might see even more extreme of a trend if, for example, you only went back to, say 2018, the dolphinfish line would be quite a bit steeper than it is on this plot. So while I think that exercise could be done, I do not think that the overall result would have changed.
Yeah, I was thinking more of the change from MRFs to MRIP, which would have been around 2006. But yeah, I do see your point on those last few time periods.
Yeah, understood. And once again, if you squint your eyes and look at 06 here, I think the results speak for themselves.
Yeah. All right, we have a question in the question box. So the question is, what is the definition of a trip for the effort data?
Yeah, an important question that has a bit of a hairy answer. I think it gets into the weeds of how the MRIP Fishing Effort Survey operates, and I'm certainly not an expert on that topic. But the Marine Recreational Information Program oversees a number of surveys, including the Angler Access Point Survey and also the Fishing Effort Survey. That's just a metric that's collected based on their I think the effort survey is a phone and perhaps also still at this point a mail survey that asks licensed anglers how many trips they took over certain time scales. So the definition of a trip, I think, is for an exclusive economic zone trip, which is what we used here, involves a vessel leaving the dock regardless, I think, of how many folks are on board that vessel. There may be people on the call who have a more thorough understanding of that data set who may be willing to chime in and help satisfy that questioner, but that's what I have for you.
All right, I'm not seeing anyone raise their hand to answer that. So we've got a couple hands up. Tom, you're unmuted. Then we'll go to David.
Thank you, Chip. Brendan, Paul, thank you for the presentation. It's really great. My question for you, Brendan, is, and I think the Wahoo data will answer this, but midway through your analysis, I believe that the Division of Marine Fisheries went from to get a citation, you had to go to a tackle shop and get it physically filled out to one that you could do online. Do you think the Wahoo data shows that the social factors of going from a physical to a online thing didn't change people's willingness to participate in this program?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Tom. So changes in that program or changes in the availability of a certified scale or weigh station, those types of things are all sort of baked into this species-specific comparison here. And that really reflects the importance of looking at two species to try to elucidate whether this trend is reflective of the abundance of the biology of the population. So I think if there had been a major change in the number of citations that folks would have gotten based on that transition from paper to online, we would see a sharp jump around that year in both data sets here. So we would see a change, but it would be parallel among or between the two species, and we don't see that. So I think we're accounting for all of those things by looking at both species. Thanks again for the question.
All right, David.
Thanks. And again, real good presentations. For folks who don't know me, I'm Dave Weimer. I'm a recreational fisherman and also very active in the dolphin research program tagging efforts. Back in Paul's presentation, the slide that really struck me was the one on the decline in fundancy. And Paul, I wonder if you could elaborate a little bit more on the data behind that slide, how it was arrived at. It seems to me that that is one of the most significant points that came out of the presentation and really points toward how critical this situation with dolphin may be.
Yeah, thanks for the question, David. So we used a published predictive relationship between female dolphinfish size and fecundity. And that's then just a plug and play exercise. You can use that published, Y versus X relationship to then go ahead and plug in any size that you wish. And I so selected, and it made sense, so selected the first year and most recent year of sampling for each of the 5 respective tournaments. And so I could even go back, in hindsight and go back and say, well, let me try plugging in the median female dolphinfish size from 2020 and compare it to 2025 or whatever. So again, that's just using a published relationship between fish size and fecundity that was published in the primary literature a number of years ago.
Just to chime in, David, thanks also for the question. And if you do want to take a closer look at that, the QR screen's back on the QR code is back on the screen for Paul's paper at the top there, and we'd be happy to provide more details on that relationship if you'd like.
Okay, great. Is it okay if I ask a second question now too?
Yeah.
One other item that caught my attention was the comment that there's a rich source of data being held by the Puerto Rico Department of Natural Resources. And it seems to me that being a U.S. government agency, that data should be available. And I'm curious as to why it's not.
I can't give you a succinct answer on that myself, since I work for North Carolina State University. I don't have the authorization to release those data. I'm not quite sure all the details behind that. So unfortunately, David, I'm not the authority on it, trying to answer that question for you.
Yeah, and I'm not certain if anybody on the call would have the authority to get into the details on that. Sorry.
Okay, thanks. Again, that's just troubling.
All right, there's another question in the question box. Another hypothesis that I've heard in recreational circles is that there's just more habitat out there in terms of more sargassum, so the fish are more spread out. Have you done any investigation into these catch rates in regards to some measure of sargassum prevalence?
Paul, you or me?
Short answer is we have not. And I'm walking the skinny branch here. That's a really good question. I'm walking the skinny branch because I know deep in the Caribbean, Hazel Oxenford and her colleagues have and others have used satellite imagery to better understand sargassum distribution. It's also my understanding that a lot of the what I call the increasing blooms, annual blooms of sargassum are more likely to occur deep in the Caribbean than they are up here. So if we have a really strong, and this could be coerced into a model covariate really easily, if someone, including the person asking the question, can provide us a quantitative data set showing the annual amount or the estimated annual amount of that sargassum coverage in our region, I would love to see that report. And those are the kinds of quantitative data that people like Brendan and I and Jeff and others feast on. So those are the kind of data that are coveted in fisheries ecology studies such as this. And I'm not aware, to the best of my knowledge, those data have not been quantified for our region of the Western North Atlantic. I could be wrong, but that's my snapshot answer.
I also want to jump in and say that I'm not sure I fully agree with the premise of the question that if the coverage of sargassum decreased, that fish would be more spread out and therefore catch rates would decline. I would think that a lower level of sargassum would perhaps concentrate animals, and that the existing sargassum would be saturated with fish, and perhaps even the most dominant fish. As many of you know, that dolphinfish are known to be cannibals, and so that premier habitat would likely be occupied by the largest individuals, and therefore they would perhaps be the catchability of those animals would go up. So I think there's a lot of ins and outs and what have you to that question. But as Paul said, that is something that could be looked at.
So, and just to ask an obvious question, what were the trends in length distribution for the MRIP survey? Did you guys look into that and compare it to your data sets?
That's a really good question. Chip, and I'm trying to remember old conversations with Jeff and others on that. We had, I think, if I recall properly, we had misgivings about doing that for a variety of reasons. One is that the change in the MRIP sampling protocol. I don't think we had a deep dive into that, Chip, but I can't remember the details in that. So that would be a potential good follow-up exercise. Do you remember any details in that conversation, Brendan?
No, I do not.
Well, I feel like I'm getting asked all kinds of questions. I do have a couple more, but I want to give others opportunity to ask some questions. Apparently, I'm geeking out on this a little bit too much. So while I wait for others to either type a question or raise their hand, Paul, do you think it's possible to look at growth rates over time, given your data sets? It's seeming that dolphin migrate along the coast. Do you get a signal of changing size distribution as they move northward or anything like that? Or is the tournament data set up in sequential form that you'd be able to look at different months, the size distribution, and potentially look at recruitment or new cohorts coming into the population?
Yeah, you talking about moving forward now, Chip, and tackling looking at the recruitment issue using different waves of recruits coming into each of the tournaments. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, these tournaments are, that's a really good suggestion for a follow-up, and these tournaments are static in time and space. We know the Big Rock, for example, coming up in a few weeks is always the second week of June. It's always in Morehead City. They always fish between whatever it is, 33.5 and 35.1 degrees north with those latitudinal boundaries and no longitudinal boundaries. But generally speaking, those areas are fixed. Folks aren't going to fish that far east beyond the where they think dolphin fish occur. So you could look at that recruitment issue. Again, I think using these tournaments as a sampling venue. So moving forward in time, that might be a really good suggestion to tackle the issue that you brought up. Brendan, did you have anything to add on that?
No, Paul, I think you covered it. Thanks.
And then Brendan, for your time series, looking at, you had mentioned that the day of reporting hadn't changed much, but it looked like the variance was decreasing over time. Yeah. So if you look at 2022, 2023, it looks like those have smaller whiskers than the rest of them. Did you look at the change in variance over time in regards to this data set?
I didn't, Chip, but I do want to just point out that you're talking about roughly 1/8 the sample size in 2023 versus the earlier years in the time series. So you're going to wind up with a tighter sample, assuming a constant distribution of sizes over in the population above 35 pounds. So yeah, that. I don't think that's something that would hold water, but I'd have to think more about it. We haven't seen a citation past the 300th day of the year, which, as you all know, is October 27th, since like 2019. So maybe there's something to that, Chip. I'm gonna have to chew on that one more.
Always good to make you think. All right, I am not seeing any other hands. I'm seeing quite a few people drop off, so I think we can go ahead and end the webinar today. Thank you all, or thank you both for a great presentation, and everyone else for joining the conversation. We hope you found it interesting. Once again, we hope to have this posted by Friday. If you'd like to see this presentation again, or if you'd like to pass it on to others, you could find it at our seminar series page. Our next seminar will be, let's see, July 8th, and I'm still working on the topic, but hopefully we will have something soon. Paul or Brendan, if you want to have any last remarks for closing.
Just thanks to everyone for their participation, and thanks for the invite, Chip.
Sure.
Ibid, yes, thank you, Chip.
All right. Thank you all. Have a good afternoon.